Hello again and welcome back to another Mighty Fine presentation production. Today we'll be looking very closely at verbal cues and what are they and how to use them. So let's get going. First we'll look at what exactly are verbal cues, then why do we need them, and finally how do we use them. So let's look at the first one. What exactly are verbal cues? Well, verbal cues are short phrases used to help the audience follow your presentation and make it a lot easier to understand. So let's look at some examples, some phrases that you can use. Let me begin with. Now let's look at to sum up the main points in conclusion, and let's move on to. Now there are literally hundreds of verbal cues, but these are just a sample, so we'll look at some more. Here we go. Let's look at the second point. Why should I use them? Well, why should we use them? Well, we need them to help the audience follow our ideas. Without them, audience will find it very difficult to know when your presentation actually starts, when it ends, and what information belongs to which point. So just a few examples to make it really logical for the audience. Starting your presentation. Let's begin with. It's a very common one. Maybe some of you can guess. Let me start with. With these, people know you are starting your presentation. To end the point. That's all I have to say about. And some others. To start your next point, let's move on to, now let's look at, and bringing your presentation to a close. Number 4, finishing your presentation. That brings me to the end of my presentation. And there are a few stages in the end, your summary, your conclusion, and your Q&A. So let's look at a few phrases that you can use in the final stages. So, in summary, to sum up the main points of my presentation, to summarize the main points of my presentation, in conclusion, I'd like to conclude by saying, are there any questions? So all of these cues will add logic, coherency, and a lot of clarity to your presentation. People can follow it much more easily than without. So I think the best way to understand this is to see some examples of the with and without verbal cues. So let's have a look at the previous Whitebeard sales examples, the market growth, the Whitebeard sales, and one example with and one example without. So first of all, the without verbal cues. Let's have a look at that. So here we go. So good afternoon, my name is Ken, and today I will be talking about the Whitebeard market growth versus sales. I have 3 points to my presentation. My first point, market growth, sales history, what can we do about it? So here you can see the seasonal asanas, they are increasing, and here you can see that our sales are not increasing. So what can we do about it? So let's look at using verbal cues and how it differs from without. So good afternoon, my name is Ken, and today I will discuss the market growth versus sales of our Whitebeard. So I will divide my presentation into 3 parts. My first point will be market growth. Then I'll move on to our sales history. Finally, I will look at what can we do about it. So by the end of my presentation, you will have a good understanding of what our sales position is and what the future lies in store for us. Alright, so let's move on to my first point. Let's begin with market growth. So as you can see here, the seasonal Santas are growing rapidly. We are from about 10,000 and we're just a little bit over 20,000 at the moment. Now what I would like to remember here is that there is good potential in the market and it is growing. So let's move on to my second point, whitebeard sales. So as we mentioned, here are seasonal Santas. Now let's have a look at how our sales measure up. As you can see, they're not decreasing, but they're remaining constant, and they're just not keeping up with the actual market growth. So what can we do about it? Well, that brings me to my third point. So let's move on to what can we do about it? What I would propose is that we put our markets on the shelves much earlier than our competition, say June and July. So we'll see how that goes over and measure the results next year. Alright, well, thank you very much for listening. That brings me to the end of my presentation. In conclusion, yeah, that's a bit of an example. So, as we saw before, that just these tips from this presentation will help, definitely, but use them with the other 9 and you will have even more dynamic and memorable presentations. Well, I hope you enjoyed this segment of our presenting series. This is only a small sample and the tip of the iceberg in your journey to become the best presenter that you can be. So be sure to go to mightyfinepresentation.com and sign up to receive more free information, some ebooks coming up, and some details on our training and mentoring programs. So thank you again for joining us today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.